Canada just made a move that has completely flipped the script on Donald Trump's trade war, and it's not what anyone expected. While the world watched Trump impose crushing tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, expecting Canada to buckle under pressure, Prime Minister Mark Carney has done something that's left trade experts stunned. He's quietly dismantling his own retaliatory tariffs on American goods, and the reason why reveals a strategic masterstroke that could change everything. To understand why this matters, we need to rewind to how Mark Carney even got into this position. Just 8 months ago, Carney was a former central banker with no elected office experience. Today, he's the Prime Minister of Canada, leading one of the most dramatic political comebacks in recent history. When Justin Trudeau announced his resignation in January 2025, amid plummeting approval ratings, few predicted that Carney would not only win the Liberal Party leadership in a landslide, capturing nearly 86% of the vote, but would then lead his party to victory in a snap election that was framed as a referendum on Trump himself.
But this decades-long process of an ever closer economic relationship with the United States is now over. And as a consequence, many of our former strengths as a country, former strengths more particularly as our economy, strengths based on close ties to America, have become our vulnerabilities. And as a result of that, the jobs of workers in our industries most affected by the U.S. tariffs in autos and steel and lumber are under threat. And our businesses are holding back investments restrained by the pall of uncertainty that's hanging over all of us. Our relationship with the United States will never again be the same as it was, even though in this new world of protectionism, we have the best trade deal of any other country, and we're working to make it even better still.
Carney's rise came at the exact moment when Trump's trade aggression reached fever pitch. The American president had imposed 25% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, while simultaneously making inflammatory comments about Canada becoming the 51st U.S. state. These weren't just economic attacks, they were direct challenges to Canadian sovereignty that unified the country in ways not seen in decades. Canadians began boycotting American products, booing the U.S. national anthem at hockey games, and canceling trips to the United States. The Trump effect had backfired spectacularly, giving Carney's Liberals the political momentum they needed to overcome what had looked like certain defeat to Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives. But here's where Carney's strategy gets truly brilliant. While Trump expected Canada to escalate the trade war, Carney has been methodically doing the opposite. On October 15th, his administration quietly lifted tariffs on American steel and aluminum products, particularly those linked to public health, national security, manufacturing, agriculture, and food packaging. This wasn't surrender, it was calculated economic warfare disguised as pragmatism. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne explained the logic with surgical precision.
There are some steel products that you just don't make in Canada, so you need to make sure that, industry can still procure these products.
One of the most prominent products, the classic steel I-beam, a core construction component that isn't made in Canada but can now come north tariff-free.
For us, our access to the American economy and to projects in the U.S. and to products coming in from the U.S. is paramount.
That will let Canadian steel fabricators bid on U.S. contracts without feeling the impacts of tariffs. But the Canadian Steel Producers Association says 80% of what the Canadian economy needs can be produced domestically. They're upset the new exemptions are over 100 pages long and include specific carve-outs for certain companies.
There are some steel products that Canada simply doesn't manufacture domestically. By maintaining tariffs on these essential goods, Canada was essentially punishing its own industries rather than pressuring America. So instead of hurting Trump, these tariffs were creating supply chain nightmares for Canadian manufacturers who couldn't source alternatives domestically. This reveals the fundamental asymmetry that makes Trump's trade war ultimately unsustainable. Canada is America's largest trading partner, with nearly 3.6 billion Canadian dollars worth of goods and services crossing the border daily. Canada is the top export destination for 36 U.S. states. More than 75% of Canada's exports go to the United States, But this dependency cuts both ways. American industries have built their supply chains around Canadian resources and components that simply cannot be replaced overnight. By selectively removing tariffs on goods where Canada has no domestic alternatives, Carney is forcing Trump into an impossible position. If Trump continues his tariffs, American companies that rely on Canadian steel and aluminum face higher costs while their Canadian competitors, now freed from retaliatory tariffs, can source American alternatives more cheaply. It's economic jujitsu, using Trump's own aggressive momentum against him. But Carney isn't stopping there. The timing of these tariff removals coincides with hints of a broader strategic pivot that could reshape North American trade permanently. Carney has suggested that a comprehensive trade agreement covering steel, aluminum, and energy could be ready by the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. This isn't just about managing the current crisis, it's about creating a new framework that locks in Canadian advantages while appearing to give Trump a diplomatic victory he desperately needs before the 2026 review.
Carney confirms there is a possibility for a new sectoral tariff deal with the United States by the end of the month, but is cautioning against being overly optimistic. Carney and his cabinet have been in ongoing discussions with U.S. President Donald Trump and his administration for months. Carney also signaling that it is highly unlikely any country will come away from the talks with the United States with an entirely tariff-free deal. Instead, Canada is hoping to secure deals on specific sectors, including steel, aluminum, copper, autos, and lumber. Carney will.
The genius of this approach becomes clear when you consider Carney's background. This is a man who navigated the 2008 financial crisis as governor of the Bank of Canada, then became the first non-citizen to run the Bank of England since 1694. He understands how markets really work, and more importantly, he understands how political perception shapes economic reality. By appearing to make concessions while actually strengthening Canada's position, he's giving Trump the optics of winning while ensuring Canada comes out ahead. Meanwhile, Carney is simultaneously preparing for a future where Canada is less dependent on American trade altogether. Just yesterday, he announced an ambitious goal to double Canada's non-U.S. exports within the next decade. This isn't just economic diversification, it's strategic insurance against future American trade aggression. Carney explicitly stated that the decades-long process of ever closer economic integration between Canada and the United States is now over, declaring that Canada cannot rely on one foreign partner.
Canada. I think that is the very big questions that we have to ask. And the Chinese have more or less, explicitly or implicitly linked Chinese EVs to their tit for tat tariffs on our canola oil exports, and that has huge impact on canola oil producers in parts of the country.
So at this stage, would you expect that we'd see any sort of movement on that front, or would you say it's entirely off the table? Or is it very much on the table, which is the impression that, maybe Ontario Premier Doug Ford has when he's saying there is no way we should do away with those tariffs on Chinese EVs?
Yeah, I think, if Mark Carney, if Prime Minister Carney were to meet Xi Jinping soon, if the two heads of state were to meet, I would expect, serious discussion about taking off tariffs on both fronts, on canola oil, EVs and them to us.
This represents a seismic shift in North American geopolitics. For decades, Canada and the United States have operated as economic partners with the longest undefended border in the world. Trump's trade war has shattered that relationship permanently, forcing Canada to look elsewhere for economic growth. Carney has specifically mentioned re-engaging with global giants India and China, a move that would have been unthinkable during the height of U.S.-Canada cooperation. The implications extend far beyond trade statistics. Canada possesses the world's third largest oil reserves and fourth largest natural gas reserves. As Carney puts it, Canada is an energy superpower that no longer needs to prioritize American energy security over global market opportunities. If Canada redirects even a fraction of its energy exports away from the United States toward Asian markets, American energy prices could spike while Canadian revenues diversify. Trump's tariff strategy was supposed to force trading partners into submission through economic pressure. Instead, it's accelerating the very outcome he was trying to prevent. the emergence of alternative trade relationships that bypass American influence. By making Canada an unreliable partner, Trump has pushed one of America's most stable allies toward competitors like China and India, who are eager to access Canadian resources and technology. The domestic political implications for both countries are equally dramatic. Carney's handling of the trade war has transformed him from a political newcomer into a national hero. His approval ratings have soared as Canadians rally around a leader who stands up to American bullying while protecting Canadian interests. The contrast with his conservative opponent, Pierre Poilievre, who was criticized for Trump-like rhetoric and Canada First messaging, couldn't be starker. Canadians wanted a leader who could match Trump's aggression with superior strategy, and Carney has delivered exactly that. For Trump, the situation is becoming increasingly problematic. His tariffs were supposed to demonstrate American strength and force better trade deals. Instead, they're accelerating Canadian economic independence while creating supply chain disruptions for American businesses. The political optics are particularly damaging because Carney appears reasonable and diplomatic while achieving better outcomes for Canada than Trudeau ever managed through direct confrontation. The timeline for resolution is also working against Trump. Canada's free trade agreement with the United States comes up for review in 2026, giving Carney significant leverage in future negotiations. By that time, if Canada has successfully diversified its trade relationships and reduced dependence on American markets, Trump will be negotiating from a much weaker position. The country that was supposed to be America's most reliable trading partner will have become a competitor with global alternatives. Perhaps most importantly, Carney's strategy exposes the fundamental flaw in Trump's approach to international relations. Trade wars aren't zero-sum games where one country's gain necessarily means another's loss. They're complex systems where retaliation can spiral out of control, creating lose-lose scenarios that harm everyone involved. By appearing to de-escalate while actually strengthening Canada's position, Carney is demonstrating that smart diplomacy, backed by economic strategy, beats aggressive posturing every time. The broader lesson extends beyond North America. Other countries facing American trade pressure are watching Canada's response carefully, looking for models they can adapt to their own situations. If Carney's approach succeeds in protecting Canadian interests while maintaining economic growth, it could become a template for how middle powers deal with superpower aggression in the 21st century. As this trade drama continues to unfold, one thing is becoming crystal clear. Trump's tariff war has not only failed to intimidate Canada into submission, it has created a more independent, strategically sophisticated Canadian government that no longer takes American friendship for granted. Mark Carney may have entered politics as a political newcomer, but he's proving that sometimes fresh perspectives and deep expertise can outmaneuver even the most aggressive political operators. The next few months will reveal whether Carney's gamble pays off. But for now, Canada has managed to turn Trump's greatest weapon, economic pressure, into an opportunity for strategic repositioning that could benefit the country for decades to come. In the high-stakes poker game of international trade, it appears that the former central banker is holding all the cards.